Trains are pretty ubiquitous, don't you think? They've connected people all across the world for over 200 years. But you know what's been around longer than trains? Personal issues that need solving. Well, luckily for all of us, there's an animated series that combines both things. Infinity Train. It may look fun and cartoony, but this is a show that can get pretty mature, and that's okay. If only Cartoon Network and HBO Max would understand that. Anyway, each book follows a different cast of characters traversing throughout the train while confronting and fixing their issues along the way, or consistently ignoring those issues, letting them fester and consume them. Pick your poison. Today I'll be your conductor on a journey discussing not only the train, but also the numerous characters who've been on it. It may take a while before we reach your stop, so for now, just sit back and relax. We'll be staying on track.
If you want to go home, get your number down to 0, and poof, away you go.
I'm a 0.
The Infinity Train is always ready to take in new people who are dealing with issues. There's always room. And it doesn't matter where you are, the train can show up anywhere, even inside another train. I do wonder what'll happen if multiple people get on. And I don't mean if the train is intended for multiple people like Ryan and Min. I mean if the train shows up for one person but more than one get on. Maybe it wouldn't let the extra people on. Moving on, the train has a front and a back with an infinite number of cars in between. This may or may not reference the idea that there's an infinite amount of numbers between any two numbers. Anyway, the train cruises along, hardly ever stopping, in the middle of this wasteland. And apparently the wasteland is a projection of the tape car? Like other cars project their worlds on the inside, but the tape car does the opposite? So does that mean the train really just exists in an empty void? Like, the tapes were already the most disturbing part of the train without that detail. I mean, look at this! Liquid is leaking out of her brain! Ugh! The Infinity Train has certainly been in existence for longer than regular trains have. And since the train appears differently to different people, what did people see before trains were invented? Maybe they saw a really big carriage, or perhaps some sort of living serpent vehicle, not unlike Miyazaki's cat bus. I suppose now's a good time to think about who or what created the train. In Book 4, one mentions how his algorithms are designed, so there must be a designer. Who built and programmed them? I suppose the train was created by some deity who's a firm believer in tough love. Or maybe Satan created it. And I don't mean that as a joke. A major influence on Infinity Train is the Mysterious Stranger segment from the film The Adventures of Mark Twain.
I can do no wrong, for I do not know what it is.
By the way, this is a really underrated movie. I highly recommend it. It's free on YouTube. Anyway, whoever it is that created the train, their rationale is basically, people won't confront their issues without outside assistance, so I'll build this train, pluck people out of their lives, and force them to confront their issues while going through life-threatening situations. It's a recurring joke in the fandom that once passengers get off the train, they'll need therapy for their therapy. The train is supposed to help people, I get that, but people aren't just gonna forget about stuff like this. Or this. Or this. Oh, that reminds me, I'm supposed to show you this corporate message.
Hello. The good folks here at Infinity Train LLC are not responsible for any therapy passengers receive after they leave the train. Frankly, we don't even understand why anyone would need therapy after being on the train, since the train is the ultimate therapeutic experience. You can't argue with the results. I mean, look at this guy. He used to be a pushover, but now he's cool and confident. Here are some quotes from people who have clearly enjoyed their train experience. Whenever you're in need of the train, it will appear. We're always watching you. And we definitely don't trick you to get on the train at all. The Infinity Train, the ultimate therapeutic experience. Follow the rules or you'll die!
Something I frequently wondered about is how people stay fed. People are on this train for months and sometimes even years, so there has to be food. It's been confirmed that there are many cars with snacks, but I imagine these snacks are either incredibly basic or not filling enough. Or both. We see regular food in a few cars, and Jesse's brief comment shows there are seemingly not a lot of these.
Who's hungry for adventure?
Me! I'm also hungry for real food!
I guess when you're on the train, you just eat whatever you can find. It's been confirmed that there are laundry cars, which is nice. As for bathrooms, I guess people just go wherever. Going back to all the dangers on the train, can people get a new number if their hand or arm is chopped off? I mean, clearly several people have lost their hands and arms, but what happens afterward? Under 1 and Amelia, the passengers would probably just be stuck forever. But after 1-1 became conductor, they'd probably have their number placed somewhere else on their body. Will we ever see a passenger who doesn't have any hands to begin with? It'll be interesting to see where their number is. Maybe it's on their forehead or something. Speaking of passengers being stuck forever, it's implied that it's possible for passengers to become denizens.
Big Baby must be kept happy.
Until Big Baby dies.
And you'll be the new Big Baby.
Has anyone ever turned down the train? I mean, the train kind of tricks you into getting on, but to my knowledge it doesn't outright force you. Surely someone must have seen a train appear out of nowhere and noped out of the situation. Maybe it does actually compel passengers' minds to make them get on, I don't know. Surely the Infinity Train should be well known, right? Especially if enough people who went missing report the same story. Unless they don't say anything because people will think they're crazy. I guess the train could be dismissed as a delusion and pictures could be dismissed as edited. Though with the sheer amount of passengers on the train, I have to ask, do regular missing person cases even exist in this universe? Has everyone been on the train but they're just too afraid to talk about it? It's probably a big secret that the government is trying to cover up, but so many people have been on the train that I'm not sure it's even necessary. We know that Ryan and Min wrote songs about the train, but they're presumably not the only ones to reference it in media. I think Tulip and Jesse and Lake will cause the train to become more well known since they're the first people to leave the train with physical evidence. Well, Tulip's isn't exactly physical, but you know what I mean. It's only a matter of time before everyone knows about it.
My baby! Mwah, mwah, mm.
Oh, nice. Didn't know you were like a dad, but I can see it now.
Yes, I'm talking about Book 4 first, because chronologically it takes place before the first 3. The code word for Book 4 is comedy, and that's pretty clear especially after Book 3, which was tragedy. However, Book 4 still has a serious situation that's somewhat obscured by the comedy. 2 is the big number in this book. 2 people come on the train at the same time, seemingly for the first time. Their numbers are 202, and the book's official title is Duet. Ryan and Mingy were best friends early in life, but they drifted apart before coming together again when they were on the train. Before they got on the train, they were unhappy with their lives. They each thought the other was living the better life. They're kind of envious of each other. While on the train, Ryan needed to learn to be less impulsive, and Min needed to accept that he can do things that he wants to do, not just things others want him to do. They learned that they're happiest when they're living their dreams together. It shows that no matter how strained the friendship may seem, there's always hope for it to get better. This book also gives the lesson that your life won't be satisfying if you're tailoring it to someone else's interests. Ultimately, you should be in control of your life. And I know it's really heartbreaking that countless people had to deal with situations where they're forced to do things by controlling parents, and I hope that everyone in situations like that can make it out of them and prosper on their own. Ooh, that got real serious. What is this, book 3? Some people are miffed that we didn't see Ryan and Min become a couple. But remember that this takes place at a time when it wasn't seen as normal to be gay. Ryan and Min were likely raised with internalized homophobia. None of them are aware of their own sexualities, and thus Ryan has no idea why he couldn't hold on to a girlfriend. They didn't become a couple on the train because they were unaware that it's not bad to be gay. Luckily, times have changed. Happy Pride Month, everyone. Anyway, they probably did become a couple prior to the final scene, though. And if not, then shortly after. Book 4 is unique in that it also shows a denizen learning an important lesson. I'm not counting Lake as a denizen, they're a person, damn it. Yes, I've accepted the headcanon that Lake is non-binary. Anyway, Kez is an interesting character because she causes a lot of the conflict of the book, but this conflict actually helps Ryan and Min solve their issues. It's never been said how long they were on the train, but I think it wasn't very long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. However, it would have been a lot longer if Kez's chaos didn't happen. She never had any malicious intent, but she never took any responsibility for the consequences of her actions. She learned that you have to own up to your actions. You're accountable for what you do. Overall, while there were some serious moments, Book 4 is lighter in tone than the previous books. I think that's because this was intended as a breather in between the horrors Book 3 brought us and Book 5, which would focus on Amelia's takeover of the train. We got to see a little bit of that in Book 4, but it was mostly in the background. More on that closer to the end of this video.
It feels like every time I find something logical about this train, it's thrown back at me and I'm stuck without answers.
We can't always force progress, Tulip.
Other than Amelia, the passenger with the greatest impact on the train is Tulip, named as such because she has 2 lips. Named as such because there were complications with her birth, but she bounced back, like a perennial flower. But yeah, Tulip's impacts on the train are numerous. 1-1 becoming conductor again, Amelia cleaning up the messes she made, Lake going on their emotional journey, the dissolution of the Apex, and probably more that we haven't seen. And none of that would have happened if she wasn't dumped in the snow car. Great job, Amelia. You could have just made the car that 1-1 was in inaccessible, but you didn't. Traveling with Tulip let 1-1 see the plights passengers endure firsthand, which led to him becoming a much kinder conductor than he was before Amelia took over. He actually provides guidance now, rather than his previous figure-it-out or you'll die attitude. Tulip initially had trouble progressing through the train because of her analytical mind. She's a video game programmer, so she viewed the train like a game she needed to finish, rather than an emotional journey. She had to learn to use her heart as well as her head, and that helped her come to terms with her parents' divorce. Life isn't always fair, and sometimes you have to make the best of your situation. Being on the train helped Tulip appreciate the relationship she had. For example, she was initially angry and bitter over her parents' divorce, but reviewing the memory allowed her to accept it. She learned to not blame herself for things that are out of her control, and she learned to accept help. Once she got off the train, she grew closer to her parents, and probably also to Michaela and any other friends she has. It's convenient that the show skipped ahead 7 months, so we didn't have to worry about all the panic and the tears and the "where were you, do you have any idea how worried we were?" As I mentioned earlier, Tulip is the first passenger to have undeniable evidence she was on the train, her missing reflection. It'll probably freak people out and maybe make some people think she's a vampire, but it should give credence to her inexplicable adventure. I mean, at the very least, it's a cool party trick. How will Tulip's adventures on the train inspire her creatively? Well, writing songs about the train is cool, but making video games about the train is even cooler. I imagine her game will be a lot more explicit about it than Chicken Choice Judy's music. It'll be the second best game in existence. Second to good guys popping bad guys, of course. Yeah, and someone will get so frustrated that they can't beat the game that they'll end up on the train. That almost flowed like a rap, wow. Okay. As the years go by, Tulip will inevitably be the leading voice in making the train common knowledge. Sure, Lake obviously has indisputable evidence of the train's existence, namely their own existence, but I don't think Lake is the type of person who wants a lot of attention. Jesse, on the other hand, would be all too happy to talk with everyone since he's such a nice guy. Speaking of...
Too many people qualified, so they needed someone to stay behind. I really wanted to go, but I didn't.
But don't you care about doing what you want to do?
Yeah, I guess.
Ah yes, Book 2, which is my personal favorite. I'm not 100% sure why that's the case, but I think it's because of the characters. Especially Jesse, he's just so dorky, I love him. As mentioned in the corporate video, the major issue Jesse had to solve was that he was a pushover. For much of his life, he just went with the crowd and frequently gave in to peer pressure because he didn't want to feel left out. So when some bullies pressured him into letting them push his brother down a hill on a washing machine, for some reason, he did. And then his brother broke his arm, and because Jesse really cares about Nate, he felt really guilty and depressed. And those feelings attract the train. Jesse learned to be more self-confident and to assert himself more. But of course that was just his first time on the train. He was so distraught that Lake was still on the train at the mercy of the flex that he got back on. I saw a meme that said that since everyone sees the train differently, Jesse definitely saw it as Thomas the Tank Engine. And now I can't get that out of my mind, and I'm just picturing Jesse all sad because Lake is still on the train, and then Thomas appears. I have returned for you, my son. The train freaks out because Jesse's problem won't be solved unless Lake leaves the train, but Lake isn't supposed to leave the train, and yeah, chaos ensues. The train runs on logic and rules, but love throws everything out of whack. To quote myself from a previous video, love is the strongest form of magic. Much stronger than cold logic. Luckily, Lake found the workaround and successfully got off the train. Lake's story is an allegory for racism/sexism/homophobia/insert other form of prejudice here. They were constantly belittled the entire time they were on the train, constantly being called inferior. Book 2, as well as Book 3, preaches the theme that people who aren't like you are still people too, no matter how much some may say that they aren't. The way Lake is treated as less than human by the Flex and the Apex parallels numerous disenfranchised groups throughout history. The quest to be seen as a true person is something that many can relate to.
You've got co-star billing now.
But you'll probably be paid less because Hollywood breeds gender inequality.
So yeah, Lake has easily become a character that people project on. I do wonder how much Lake and Jesse are going to tell Jesse's parents about what happened. Sure, they'll probably believe the story, considering there's a literal chrome person sitting in their living room, but the kids might not want them to find out about this. And now that they're on Earth, Lake may experience some harassment from those bullies that hurt Nate, but really that'll only result in people getting broken faces. Metal fist shatter bone. I do hope that one day Lake and Tulip will randomly run into each other and have a Spider-Man moment. Here's a drawing I did of this famous meeting. So Tulip doesn't have a reflection anymore. Got it, makes sense. But Lake does have a reflection, and that always was the case, not just after they left the train. How does this work? Legitimately, how does this work? Is there a mirror Lake now? Why would the Flex bother assigning a reflection to Lake if they intend to grind them down? Sounds like a waste of a reflection. Unless Lake's reflection is a normal reflection and not a sentient one? I don't know. Oh, but right now we have to think about the existential horror that every other reflection is stuck reflecting and not being an individual. Your reflection could be like that right now and you wouldn't even know. Will the other reflections find out about Lake's escape and try to rebel against the Flex? I don't know how successful such a rebellion would be, but it would be interesting to see. Oh, and since reflections can choose to become flecks when their prime dies, will Simon's reflection become a fleck? Because that seems about right.
No other kids?
Yeah, my mom and dad were all about learning from the best, which always just meant I was alone.
The stories of Grace and Simon really showcase the biggest flaw in how the train used to be run. You were left completely on your own, and if you didn't figure out what you're supposed to do, too bad. People like Ryan and Ming got lucky that there was a denizen willing to explain it to them. As for Grace, well, she was by herself, and when she saw that Amelia, the conductor, had such a high number, she concluded that the higher your number is, the better. Which was wrong, but given the circumstances, it was a fair conclusion. At some point, she figured out harming denizens would raise your number, and thus the Apex was born. What the Apex did was obviously horrible, but it really just stems from two sad and traumatized children knowing nothing of the mysterious, scary world they found themselves stuck in. It's pretty tragic, to be honest. If only those videos were present from the start. Eventually, Grace will have to tell the cat about Simon's death, and I'm sure the cat will blame herself. Sure, Simon is ultimately responsible for his actions, but many of them stem back to Samantha. I have to ask, why did the cat seemingly not tell Simon about the purpose of the train? If she did, then maybe he could have told Grace and then they could have had fun not committing more crimes? Simon's clearly traumatized from being abandoned by the cat. His abandonment issues could potentially stem from the loss of one or both of his parents, considering he's very familiar with funerals. Think about it like this. He already lost a parent and or parents, then he wound up in a terrifying fantasy train, he found comfort in a companion, and then he was left behind again. That'll obviously mess a kid up. It could explain why he and Grace clicked so well, since she too dealt with her parents being absent. Simon eventually settled into his new life of sadism. Tuba certainly wasn't the only denizen he murdered without remorse. Hazel was living a happy life, and Simon exposed her to the true horrors of reality. She'll be better now that she's with someone who doesn't want to kill her. Grace was likely a significant missing person case given her parents are rich. They'd probably pay a lot to find her. Maybe they realized that being distant like they were caused Grace to run away, from their perspective at least. And she's been on the train for like 8 years, so she's certainly been declared dead. Speaking of bad parenting, a lot of the Apex kids probably came from broken homes. Many of them were probably open to the idea of staying on this freaky train for their whole life. Grace and Simon didn't treat them spectacularly, but it was probably better than wherever they came from. Would they even want to leave after they found out the purpose of the train? Hopefully there's some way to get them into foster homes once they get off. How long will it take Grace to leave the train? Well, look at how fast her number goes down by the end. I think the rate at which a number increases and decreases is proportional to how high it is, thus Grace's number went down at a much faster rate than someone with a 2 or 3 digit number. Now that Grace's number is at 501, it'll probably go down at a normal rate. It'll probably take her a year or 2 or 3 to leave. Will she have to make peace with Hazel for her number to reach 0? Perhaps. The guilt would probably be too much otherwise. I would have ended this segment there, but I have to bring up the fact that for a while I thought Grace wore spikes before I realized they were those tags they put on clothes to prevent shoplifting. She makes them look fashionable though.
I took control. Tried to recreate my old life. Failed. Again and again and again. Created things that never should have been.
Finally, it's time to discuss Amelia, who's arguably the show's overall main character, something that will be more apparent if we got all 8 intended books. She rose, she fell, and then she rose again to atone for her sins. She was once a young tech geek who loved subverting authority but loved Ulrich even more, but then Ulrich died, possibly in a tragic dirt biking accident, and Amelia got really sad. She was probably going to commit suicide, so the train saved her. I mean, think about it, she left her house the day of Ulrich's funeral and climbed to the top of a building. She was trying to join him in death, but the train put a stop to that. We don't know much about her initial time on the train, book 5 would have covered that. But at some point she managed to get in One's good graces. She got her clothes back and worked with him closely. One mentioned that the train is capable of anything, and Amelia was like, "Anything, you say?" She begged One to create a car with Ulrich, but he refused, so she took things into her own hands. Amelia really missed the point of the train. The train helps you come to terms with reality, but she refuses to do that. Loss is something everyone experiences, but she's unwilling to accept that Ulrich is gone. So she spent 33 years trying and failing to recreate him, but the closest she got was an old turtle with his voice. I mean, it's still impressive that she managed to recreate his voice, the same voice that speaks to the Titan. One was pretty callous and kinda had no soul, not gonna lie. He was blatantly apathetic about passenger safety, was probably able to control them with the boots, and made them wear identical outfits since he saw no reason to individualize them. As mentioned before, Amelia loved subverting authority, so a hostile takeover was right up her alley. I'm not saying what she did was wonderful, but she certainly had a point in criticizing one and taking over. She certainly improved stuff like letting passengers keep their clothes and belongings. Belongings helped Ryan and Min and Jesse, but they probably would have gotten off the train without them. Lake, on the other hand, would have certainly been killed by the Flex, and Tulip wouldn't have had her Swiss Army knife. Why does a 13-year-old own a Swiss Army knife? Maybe she found it on the train. We don't know what exactly Amelia did to one, but he became 1-1, developing two personalities, one happy and British and the other sad and American. One was serious and British, so I think it's less of a split personality and more like sad one being sucked out of 1-1, leaving glad one as the result. Talking with both voices at the same time in the unfinished car was him trying to get back to being one to the best of his ability.
They don't need to worry anymore. I'm here to get things back in order.
1-1 was still compelled to fulfill his original role as conductor even when he didn't know what that was. Why didn't Amelia just destroy him? Well, the train might be unable to run if he was destroyed, so she just dumped him in a random car. And as I said before, if she was smart, she would have made that car inaccessible. You know, Amelia could have done so much more to improve things on the train during her tenure as conductor, but she didn't because she only cared about her own interests. And the cars she made were pretty stale because she was relying on her decades-old memories of Ulrich. At least someone good came out of it. In Book 3, we see Amelia quarantining the cars she made, since I guess they're not really necessary anymore. But that leads to the horrifying thought that something will happen to Atticus. It's never confirmed, but it's implied that his car was one that Amelia made, so is he gonna die? Maybe 1-1 will make an exception for the Corgi car since Atticus is his friend. He better, because Atticus is a good boy!
I'm a good man.
The Corgi car is admittedly more functional than some of the other Amelia cars we've seen. Amelia may also have to get rid of the Gomes, which are also implied to be her creations. Gomes represent what she felt when Ulrich died, like her life had been sucked away. Ouch. Yeah, Amelia made a lot of mistakes, but Hazel isn't one of them. She's the opposite of a mistake. What's the opposite of a mistake? Let's go with perfection. Hazel is perfection. When we last see her in Book 3, Amelia is really only interested in Hazel as an experiment, but I think that over time she'll eventually come to see Hazel as her daughter, which will help her number go down even further than it already has. I don't know if she'll ever leave the train, but if she does, it'll be because Hazel is so precious that Amelia will just have to better herself even further to justify being in Hazel's presence. Could Hazel leave the train? She has the number, but it's static, more like a birthmark than anything else. Could she get a tattoo of a 0 and leave? If that works, I may have figured out an important Infinity Train speedrunning tactic. Although maybe not, since it seems like Lake would have tried that. They're definitely not above engraving a 0 into their hand. Come on, HBO Max. Renew Infinity Train so we can finish Amelia's story. Book 5 would deal with her early days on the train, grieving over Ulrich and eventually usurping one, while another book, probably Book 6, would see more of her with Hazel. The theme of Book 6 is guilt, and Hazel may feel guilt over Tuba's death. After all, it was her presence that caused the color clock car to be shifted. Amelia, having slowly come to terms with Ulrich's death, would comfort Hazel since she knows what it's like to lose a loved one. I'm hopeful that the show will come back one day. Look at these credits, I'm listing the show as still ongoing. 'Cause I've got hope. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. We've seen a lot of examples of networks screwing over animated shows, like with True Colors getting delayed and the Owl House Season 3 being short. Executives just don't seem to understand that children aren't the only people who watch cartoons. But no, more mature cartoons don't sell as much merchandise. But the world has a place for more mature animation too. And I don't mean the explicitly adult stuff like Rick and Morty, I'm talking about animation that can be more violent and serious. Some people are just blind to the truth that's right in front of them. Hopefully they'll learn one day. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was definitely one of my favorites to make. As usual, I encourage you to share your theories, they're always fun to read. Until next time, thanks for watching.